want to welcome everybody, and let's start with a word of prayer. Dear God, we thank you for the opportunity to meeting our friends. And learn together about your wisdom. We're gonna want to thank you about your history and your knowledge that brings a lot of information that we need today. In Jesus' name, amen. Well, first we're gonna do a brief recap. We were talking about the progress of deception. During the U.S. history. And I choose for these two presentations 4 times in history and 4 presidents. We have started with McKinley and Roosevelt that show us not only the manifest destiny, but the Donroe Doctrine and the big stick theory too. And we can see a lack of argument here, because we started with a destiny made by providence, and then we go to a strategic spheres of influence, that are being constructed by power, even with a soft talk. Then we pass to study the welfare state, de bem-estar, that brings to a country to a government, take care of the social security. Yes. But in the other hand, we see camps, concentration camps, even in U.S. And in each part of that history, we see controversial relations with the Latin America. And I'll try to focus on that to bring a conclusion with the nowadays presidency. So the next historical event that we will see is in the 60s with JFK and Lyndon Johnson. And a famous invasion at that time. Famous. was the Pigs Bay invasion in Cuba. But here I brought a Times Magazine report from July 19th of 1965 that said when the invasion ended in failure, Mr. Kennedy was severely shaken. The vision of the corpse of the bodies on the beaches, that men would fought so bravely and now would be shot down like dogs or carried to Castro's prisons. And the report said that in the hospital, no, the Times Magazine report said, when the president was in the hospital, tears would fill his eyes and roll down his cheeks. And it continues. And it continues. And continues. Now in the bedroom, he put his head down into his hands and almost sobbed, almost fell. But it was a very emotional picture of the president. That people would think, oh, Mr. President will end up with the invasions. But again, the worst instincts prevailed. And the US government launched the Operation Mongoose, which continued trying to murder Fidel Castro. Or even contaminate his shoes with a radioactive element, which they believed would cause his hair and beard to fall out. And at the same time of a military and financial support to Brazil, with the Operation Brother Sam. The operation started by the economic interests but the US government changed his position when in early 1962 Brazil's president João Goulart take a position refusing to completely endorse the US position on Cuba. Another reports at that time says that JFK, in a document, said that the motivation were to help to block a major disaster here. That will be seen Brazil turning into China of the 60s. And he said directly, this is where both I and all my senior advisors believe that our support should be placed. This is a document for March 27th. 4 days before the coup. And this was the first thread in an ongoing story. That explains how the last dictatorship had the complicity and support of the United States. Now we have the quote number 1. This is from a theory from a master's degree. That says, the money that U.S. put into our 1962 parliamentary elections surpassed the amount spent on their presidential campaign the previous year, which saw Kennedy elected. The idea was to elect pro-U.S. legislators to oppose João Goulart. Financialism of the opposition and an anti-communist propaganda, but it escalated. The decision was made to support a coup which would happen later, in April or May of 1964. But when events came to a head on March 31, Gordon, the American ambassador to Brazil, intervened so that the then U.S. President Lyndon Johnson would immediately recognize the legitimacy of the new government, he said. The U.S. was going to send a military force to support the coup plotters in the event of resistance or civil war, but it wasn't necessary, and so the U.S. began to deny any involvement. He explains. The U.S. then opened their financial taps to Brazil's military regime, helping to build major projects such as the Trans-Amazon Highway and the Rio-Niterói Bridge, leading to an increase in Brazil's foreign debt. When the late U.S. presidents came, it changed their relations and put an end to the autocracy. And all of this happens during the dispute of civil rights acts. All of this happened during the dispute of civil rights acts. When Johnson used his experience and reputation as a master legislator, to navigate the bill through a long Senate debate. And the civil rights leaders from that time mentioned that the both presidents, Kennedy and Johnson, individually communicated their struggle for the approval of the Civil Rights Act. Like an emotional fight. As the same as Mr. Kennedy tears dropping with the invasion failure. Civil rights leaders said that this was taken to heart by Johnson. Was taken to heart. During the dispute to ensure that each of Kennedy's promises were accepted after his death. Yes. So we see a picture of emotion and of deception at the same time. At the same time, the U.S. government brings the human rights. And decrease these same human rights to Latin America. Decrease. Brazil passes through a 21th dictatorship. 21 years of dictatorship. We led to almost 20,000 deaths. And missings. According to the nowadays database. Now, I'm gonna bring some reports of Trump's presidency. That mixed the feelings that the former presidents brought to the U.S. And what changed with him. About McKinley's and Roosevelt theory. Roosevelt's. The big stick theory. A struggle with Venezuela was established in that time. But in nowadays conflict with Venezuela, especially it says that Trump didn't conduct diplomacy before using the big stick. He just used the big stick. Moving to FDR presidency. This quote is a Foreign Affairs article, which are in the 2026 risks. I'm gonna start reading quote number 2. It's a comparison between Trump and FDR. Both presidents broke norms and precedents. Roosevelt ended the two-term tradition, a norm so significant it was later codified in the Constitution, and challenged Descartes' institutional role. But he did not defy judicial rulings or contest electoral outcomes. His norm breaking centered on the scope of federal policy and institutional design. Trump has already tried to overturn an election, routinely casts adverse court rulings, prosecutions, and media scrutiny as illegitimate, and describes domestic critics, including independent media, judges, and political opponents, as enemies of the people. The norms under pressure today concern whether the American president is effectively above the law, whether the power ministries can be used for personal and political retribution and personal enrichment, and whether the playing field for future elections, the ultimate check, remains meaningfully competitive. So we see a norm breaking in these two presidencies. A norm breaking. But only in the late one, we see enlargement of president authority and actions behind the laws. Por trás. Yes. And then this last quote, it's a presidential act of Donald Trump. that goes against the Civil Rights Acts. I'm gonna start reading. Section 1, Purpose. A bedrock principle of the United States is that all citizens are treated equally under the law. This principle guarantees equality of opportunity, not equal outcomes. It promises that people are treated as individuals, not components of a particular race or group. It encourages meritocracy and colorblind society, not race or sex-based favoritism. Adherence to this principle is essential to creating opportunity, encouraging achievement, and sustaining the American dream. But a pernicious movement endangers this foundational principle, seeking to transform America's promise of equal opportunity into a divisive pursuit of results preordained by irrelevant, immutable characteristics, regardless of individual strengths, effort, or achievement. So, even with a beautiful language, we know the meaning through this act. It is a clear fight against human rights. With a pursuit to bring meritocracy. And not equality. In not equality. Now we see another chart for the Foreign Affairs report. That is called the Donroe Doctrine in Action. With a couple of interventions all over the Latin America. Venezuela's intervention we already pointed out. Here in Brazil, we had punitive tariffs. And sanctions on Supreme Court justice. On the other side, in Argentina, a $20 billion credit line line timed to boost Milei's ahead of midterm elections. In El Salvador, as the same in Argentina, the White House visit, upgraded, and travel advisory payments for deportee detentions. In Honduras, otherwise, the US pardoned a former president, which was a dictator, and that was convicted of drug trafficking and endorsed opposition candidate, which is now a president-elect. It's controversial when we look to Venezuela. Both are former president convicted of drug trafficking. In Colombia, it certified the president as a drug war partner. Decertified. And President Petro was sanctioned. In Panama, it demanded China's removal from canal. And all over we see sanctions and tariffs. Yes, but not with their allies, which would be El Salvador's and Argentina. So the same thing that we see through history. It's a controversial freedom maintenance. It's a controversial freedom maintenance. So we could ask, what changed now? Someone want to answer that? Or add a comment? Cesar?
It's just a question. I don't. No. Okay. Yeah. No. The U.S. Yeah. Previously, they intervened military before. Yes. Okay. No. I just answered my own question. I just remember that. Yeah. The U.S. actually invaded other countries in Latin America military before. Sim, o sea, I mean, in my mind, I thought that the thing that changed was that the U.S. This was the first military intervention in Latin America, the Venezuela one. in America Latina. But actually, I think it's not because previously in other parts of Latin America, yeah, the U.S. intervened militarily. So I'm not sure about what changed now.
Yeah, we can see it through history. The every intervenence or every invasion was made through a smooth move with a huge argument yes behind it. So we start with divine pursuit, and then we pass through a secure sphere of influence, and then we pass through pull the communists away, and there's one more point about the Iraq's invasion. Because they needed to fight against the terrorism. But we see a lack of the smoothness of the argument. Because in Iraq we started that in Iraq worldwide deny of their intentions. And now they don't need to talk softly anymore. Even with all the Democrats' presidencies until Trump. So I've drawn it a line and said that once there's a lack of argument, it becomes clear that the deception has grown. Which can mention the Revelations 13 verse 14. In Guadalupe presentations, it was said that it's hard to convince someone deceived. But among people are bringing that deception, among people they are given the deception, it's easy to say anything. No, it's easy to say anything because the deception is already taken place. On the other hand, if we need to convince these people and bring it to the light, It is very hard. So the US government nowadays, they they don't need to put pressure in it because the deception has grown. Yeah. I'm not denying their own struggle in the past history. Because we see at the same we see in Israel conduction. We see a good king and a bad king throughout the history. And it wouldn't be different at our glorious land. Sorry. Pedro?
I want to know the deception would be what exactly?
I would say that deception is when you use when you make a bad action throughout a good argument and people doesn't see it. Like when the Japanese were arrested, at 10 desolate concentration camps, at 10 desolate concentration camps were taking place in the middle of the US. But people already thought they were bringing freedom. To a Nazi German. So we can see, like in Israel, that the leaders were supposed to bring peace and freedom for everyone. And they thought they were doing it even with murdering Christ. So, but it only can take place with people's agreement. So, if Trumps are seated on a poor throne, a broken throne, it was a deception that led it to it. Yeah.
You gave the example of they killed Christ.
Yeah.
And the people who killed Christ, they were in deception.
It was possible because of the deception. But I don't think the leaders were in it. Because they were thinking they need to fight against Rome. And Christ would have ruined that. I'm just giving an example of the glorious land. But nowadays, I don't think it's that same comparison. But what I'm trying to tell, that when that seventh king take place, it needs to construct it deception. But because if people are, I forgot the word to, bêbados. Yeah. If people are drunk in the seventh king, I don't think it was the first time that they drink alcohol.
A question, but so the deception is when they have the conviction on their mistake or error in their ideas, no? Yeah. Sorry. Because maybe I don't follow, but this deception is for the Americans or the intervening countries or the people in the intervening countries.
Yeah. It will be for the American people. I'm saying that because if the U.S. government talks like a dragon, people needs to be used to it. And endorse that. Yes. Another question?
Nesse caso, você está falando do norte, da América do Norte.
Yes, the United States people. Yeah. I was so colonialist, sorry.
So in this case, you're speaking about the American people.
Yes, the U.S. people.
North America.
Yes.
Yeah,
Norte América.
of North Americans.
Sorry, I committed colonialism.
Because
Yeah, yeah.
when it's North Americans.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
Mas North America e Canadá também.
Yeah. So, yeah. So before another commentary or a question, I'm gonna read what I line up. What I line up. In 1898, in American-Spanish War, the argument was a secure borders and people's freedom. Taking God to the unfaithful hearts and our uncivilized fellows. Não civilizado. 10 years after, the big stick says that we need to protect who can't protect themselves. With a soft talk and a big hand. pull apart the Catholic nations and European intervening. Then in 1942, Nipo-American concentration camps. They say that we are in war. And our people asked for security. On the other hand, the state is acting for the poor. So the state is always acting for people and their interests. Democracy is not possible without it. And then in 1964 is the anti-communist fight. That said, there's nothing worse than a communist nation. Right over the board. Like the Cuban was. Latin America doesn't know the risks. So we need to bring protection. Protection. Otherwise, in MAGAs, one of the lines of Project 2025 is to bring peace with force. And President Trump clearly said, we do it, it's for our own good. And I want to add some information. In the World War I, the US government enforced relations and connect relations with Europe. But now is the first time the US is opening to an open fight against Europe. Will be taking place at Greenland. Yes. In the World War I, the richness of the US government were brought by Europe. But now, when their pride had their limit, they are coming against their sellers. their financial support, the former financial support. So we can see Gadal or pride too in this line. Turning back to the ones that supported you. Okay. Another comment or question, Cesar?
Gracias. You said earlier that they needed to invade countries with the endorsement of the people, isn't it? And I think that he didn't do it with the endorsement of the people. I know what you meant by that, and that, well, Donald Trump was elected, and etc., and MAGA movement has a really big support. I know what you meant about that, and is because MAGA has a really huge support. But you have to also remember that he literally passed over the Congress. When he invaded Venezuela. And the Congress is the representation, literally the representation of the people. So I don't think that Donald Trump did it with the endorsement of the people, that invasion. Maybe in other stuff regarding immigration, regarding drugs, etc., but specifically military invasion, I don't think so. Maybe in other stuff like drug dealers or immigrants, but specifically in military intervention, I don't think he do it.
Yes. I think we can see two things in that. First one is a broken throne. So the presidency can act in regard of their institutions. But in the former presidencies, we see their peoples, their own struggle. When at the first time we see the suffragist movement, the social security movement, and the civil rights movement. So even with a disguise, an action disguise of the presidency, people were fighting for human rights. Yes, different. Yes, that was. I'm not confronting Cesar's idea, but I just like to add some compliment. Compliment. So, is there any other questions? Other question? No?
So finally, what do you think about the Venezuela intervention? Good or bad? What do you have to say about that?
My personal opinion. I know that Venezuelans reached I don't know how can I say that, but the worst situation possible. But the interventions within the UN organizations they have a legitimacy and they have a project. And when a nation itself and by their own intervene in a country, people there didn't see an opportunity for changing. Yeah. People only see they were saved. So it's extremely difficult to rebuild a country with that viewing. To rebuild a country with that view. Using the example of the military dictatorship of Brazil. Of course, João Goulart is not the same as Maduro. He wasn't a thief, he wasn't a human rights oppositor. But when the United States saved us, until now we are asking for this save. Yeah, this intervention. Our Brazilians. Because we don't see that we by ourselves can rebuild a country. And there's a lack of trust in our government because of that. Of course, it was a 21-year dictatorship, a military dictatorship, and we passed through a lot of corruption in the past years. But there was no time that when people wanted to rebuild it with ourselves. Because was a huge lack of trust in government. I don't think intervening is bad by itself. But there is a way to do it. Cesar, it's okay? Okay. Okay. It's okay. I can try.
But I think there are many layers in the question and also in the answer.
Yeah.
And I know it's a complex answer and also a complex question. I was just thinking about Elder Parmindeser the other day. I was just remember something that Elder Parmindeser said the other day. And I just want to remember, I just want to remind us about that very shortly. I said that if someone covers my need was sufficient, but he said, no, it's not sufficient, it's perfect, it's a perfect action. I said that covering my needs was sufficient, but Elder Parmindeser said, no, it's not sufficient, it's a perfect action. Needs. Eu disse que cobrir as minhas necessidades era suficiente, mas ele diz que não, suficiente não é, mas era perfeito. Ele diz que era perfeita a ação. Isso. So, just taking that into consideration, when you said that there is the intervention has to have some legitimacy, for me it's a little, it's just trying to justify and cover your eyes from injustice. For me, it's like trying to cover your eyes from injustice or before. So, an injustice is happening and you are covering your eyes. But you say, no, there are some, I need to wait for a legitimate action. And I'm saying this honestly. I don't want to trouble anyone. I don't want to confuse anyone or... I'm not a far right guy from thinking this. But I think it's not fully honest to use the legitimate action argument. Because sometimes, and I have gone through that, you can pass over someone in need and you say, oh, I'm Christian, but you pass over someone's needing and you pass by. You know, sometimes you have to intervene because the important thing is the action. You have to cover that someone's need and not simply thinking, my desire is the good for the people, but I cannot intervene because there is something blocking me. E atender às suas necessidades. And not simply saying, there is the UN blocking me, so I cannot do that. And not simply say that the UN is blocking me, so I cannot intervene. And also, logically, geopolitically, it is impossible to intervene a country like Venezuela through the UN because you also have to remember that there is China and also Russia with veto power. Even though Russia is not at its best, Russia has veto power in the UN, in the council, in the I forgot the name in English. That council with Great Britain, France, US, Russia, China, that council, the,
G7.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
No, the
No.
council within the UN,
The Security Council.
the Security Council, thank
Yes.
you. Remember that Russia and China has veto power in the Security Council.
Yeah.
Remember that Russia and China has power in the Security Council. And they can simply veto over the intervention that US is proposing. So geopolitically was not possible to do it through the UN. And I know that Donald Trump and the US, they are not doing it because they are good guys.
They are concerned.
They are doing it because of their own interests.
Huh? Okay.
Um,
Yeah, I can see the difficulty in that. That's why the presentation, it's about the argument. Because I can see interventions all through the history. When you argue with your people about your interests on that, they agree or not. But I see the struggle with the good acts of the King of the North. But on the other hand, I can see the deception in punishing, that the government is punishing their own people. That's why we are in this dispensation now. Curtis is a okay. Okay, that's fine. So we're gonna stop here, and I want to thank you, all of you, for the attention and of the great opportunity. Let's end with a word of prayer. Dear God, we thank you again. Even with our lack of knowledge, with our personal struggles, we can see your hand. Please make us endorse whatever the information that are bringing to us, that are brought to us. By sharing this with our friends here, our movement. Because with that, we can get closer to you. In Jesus' name, we thank you. Amen.